Hey there, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight, college students are awaiting a major overhaul of the federal financial aid process meant to be streamlined and expanded. How student misconduct changes through the use of restorative practices instead of suspensions.
This is to get back to the community, to give them an opportunity to do it. I didn't have those camps growing up.
And you might know him as the Grandy Man. We show you how a three-time MLB All-Star is giving back to local kids. And now to some of today's top stories. It felt like a shakedown. That's how a former fast food official described his interaction with former Alderman Ed Burke. Jeff McDonald, who was charged with overseeing the renovation of a Burger King in the 14th Ward, testified today in Burke's corruption trial. McDonald told jurors that Burke pressed him to set up a meeting for him with the firm's owners and encouraged them to donate to 2 Chicago charities. Burke allegedly declined to bless the project until after the firm's owners met with him. Burke faces 14 criminal charges, including racketeering, bribery, and extortion. For more on the latest in his trial, please visit our website. The Chicago Public School Board is set to vote on Urban Prep Academy's charter renewals despite ongoing litigation. Last October, the board voted unanimously against renewing the charter's campuses, citing, quote, serious and unacceptable operational issues and amid allegations of sexual and financial misconduct by Urban Prep leadership. A Cook County judge then rejected CPS's plan to take over the charter school's 2 Southside campuses and ordered officials to renew Urban Prep's charter at least through the end of the 2023-24 school year. CPS immediately appealed that decision, and the case remains ongoing. Chicago's Union Station is on track to receive more than $93 million worth of upgrades and improvements. U.S. Senators Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth, along with Congressman Mike Quigley, announced the funding for the Chicago Hub Improvement Project, or CHIP, today. The funding is intended to renovate and expand station platforms, bring platforms in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and repurpose the station's mail platform for inner-city rail service after being out of use since 2005. Durbin's office says in the last 15 years, the number of trains on Illinois tracks has doubled. A Chicago-based burger giant is set up for unprecedented growth over the next 4 years. The McDonald's empire is expecting to open nearly 10,000 restaurants over the next 4 years, a pace of growth that would be unprecedented even for the world's largest burger chain. It's aiming to have 50,000 restaurants in operation worldwide by the end of 2027, after having just over 40,000 restaurants at the start of this year. Up next, a major overhaul in student financial aid applications. What you should know right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Students applying for federal financial aid are about to enter uncharted territory. That's because the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA form, is undergoing its first major overhaul since the Reagan administration. The U.S. Department of Education says the new streamlined form will allow more than 600,000 new students from low-income backgrounds across the country to receive Pell Grants. It also says 1.5 million more students will be eligible for the maximum Pell Grant. In Illinois, that would mean nearly 22,000 new Pell Grant recipients and almost 53,000 more students eligible for the maximum. Joining us to discuss these changes are Rich Hayes, Executive Director of Financial Aid and Scholarships at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and Namika Bates, Managing Director of College Access at Chicago Scholars, which supports students as they apply for and enter college and prepare for future careers. Thanks to you both for joining us. So, of course, we just heard what the Department of Education says will be the benefits and the impact of these changes, particularly with Pell Grant recipients. But what are some of the key changes beyond simply simplifying the FAFSA FAFSA, which is hard for everyone to say, that application itself. Rich, let's start with you, please.
Some of the key changes that they're doing right now, first they're changing the EFC. The EFC has been around for a very long time.
Expected family contribution.
They're changing it to SAI, which is Student Aid Index. And the reason for that is so they can expand the net of students that can be eligible for federal Pell Grants and federal aid altogether. So that's one of the major changes. In doing so, that means that they've changed up the whole methodology of how they calculate that number. And so this new application is supposed to have way less questions. It has 108 questions now. That's more than a mortgage application.
It's a lot.
Right? Now it's supposed to go down to 46 and it's web dynamic, which means that it's based on how the student responds. It's supposed to be a lot quicker to get through that FAFSA application.
Namika, same question to you. What are some of the key changes that you notice?
It's for us, it's the date change. Yes, so we're used to October 1st. We have an entire curriculum that is designed around that date. Therefore, of course, that was our first shift. We had to immediately rethink our curriculum so that we could accommodate the new December date.
Yeah, and that date changes. Typically, students have access to the FAFSA application on October 1st. Now, Department of Ed is saying that it'll be ready no later than December 31st, which is a full 2 months later.
Yes.
And it's New Year's Eve, in case anybody has plans. So that's a lot later. So, Namika, get into that a little bit more. Yes. What kind of anxiety are students experiencing, and what kind of impact is that delay going to have on those students that you work with?
Well, we were notified early enough to be able to give our students a heads up. So I think the fact that all students are impacted by this is helpful, right? It's like they're not in this alone. They know everyone is waiting. And I think for students, that's always helpful to know that they've got folks in this with them. So I think from their perspective, it's about the unknown. Nobody knows what the form is going to look like. We keep saying it's shorter, and it's coming out on New Year's Eve, right? And our students are
Christmas if it's sooner.
Right. Right. And so our students are high performing, they're engaged, and so of course this is top of mind for them.
They're excited. This is important to them, of course.
Absolutely.
Rich, what does this mean for your office and the students that you work with at USC?
We have high anxiety. I'm going to say all financial aid administrators across the nation have high anxiety. We just got through with the Federal Student Aid Conference, and we didn't get much information there. But what this means for us is because anytime a new year comes in, we have to test it to make sure that it's working properly, to make sure students are packaged with the right amount of aid. That means that our window to test is now shrunk to a very small window. And then it also means that award letters, financial aid notifications is going to go out a lot later than they should. So we plan our entire year based on when we put out our financial aid notifications, and other institutions as well. So now students that come and see us, we have to move those dates up, and we have to let them know about those financial aid notifications a whole lot later.
Let's talk about those award letters a little bit. How important are those letters, like once a student knows what their expected family contribution or now their student aid index, whatever that might be, what that is, that helps schools determine how much students are receiving. And then they make plans around that.
Exactly. And so that can be a yes or a no, depending on who gets that federal aid notification out first. What I will tell students is to be patient, because that doesn't mean that they're not going to get certain scholarships or certain institutional aid just because they're getting a late notification. It just means that you want to pick the right school for you. But every school is affected with this new deadline that's coming out. But those financial aid notifications are critical because now they need them even for graduation. It's a requirement. And so if they don't have that, that pushes the timeline for, say, CPS students. And then we're looking at our low-income students. We're looking at our African-American students who are greatly impacted by getting those notifications late.
Your first-gen students.
Yes.
Of course. Under this new system, Namika, financial aid information will be shared with the IRS. What's the concern there?
The concern is that we oftentimes struggle with getting tax documentation from first-generation low-income families. There is just a general concern about how we're using this information, where is it going. We work with undocumented students. Therefore, we already know what those challenges are with getting that information. And so I think the automatic tax upload is potentially going to be a significant impact on our students, particularly because of that change.
What are some of the concerns or the impacts that you're concerned about, particularly for Black students?
Yeah, I would kind of continue on with that perspective of how getting the award letter later impacts their scholarships, right? So we know that from our curriculum particularly, as soon as our students finish their applications, we start working on scholarships. all of that is, as Rich mentioned, is being pushed back. And it's also causing our students to apply for more scholarships because they don't know. So that's more work, that's more energy, that's more anxiety, right? All of those things.
Especially around the holiday season when maybe it's time for them to decompress a little bit and kind of let it go.
Exactly, and that's what we typically encourage our students to do during this time is, we take them through a rigorous on-site experience at Navy Pier in October, and so this is usually their kind of, okay, we did that and now we're ready to go, but.
Sit back and wait, and not so much. Well, we're waiting. Rich, the other thing is everyone is required to have an FSA or Federal Student Aid ID versus using their Social Security number in this application. What impact do you think that'll have?
So the FSA ID is something that's been around for a while, but when I came up at school, they had a PIN number. It was a 4-digit PIN. It was a whole lot easier, right? But now what they're doing is undocumented parents must have a FSA ID as well, and now they introduce a new term called contributor to the FAFSA application, and that means that anybody that has to submit information, they must have an FSA ID as well. So what they're doing for undocumented parents, it's a button you click within the FAFSA that says that your parent doesn't have a Social Security number, then they can add their address. But for undocumented parent, that's still going to make them more apprehensive about getting it done because they feel like they're putting their information into some type of federal system. And then from an FTI standpoint, what you said, it's a requirement. If they decline it, they have to consent.
That's right.
Every contributor has to consent on that FAFSA. If they decline it, it will say that they're ineligible for financial aid.
And the other part of that, by having everyone else sort of join your application, you're then reliant on other folks in the family to get it done. And they may be working multiple jobs and raising multiple kids.
Sure.
It works like a workflow now. So before, the student would do it for both maybe their undocumented parent themselves. They can just go through that entire application. Now they have to do their section. The contributor has to come and do their section, but you can't do each other's section. So now it's going to cause some type of delay for a student to actually get that done, especially for a parent who may not speak English.
Namika, we've got 30 seconds left. Most important piece of advice that you're giving students right now?
Don't fear the change. Because everyone is going through this, there are going to be plenty of people who will be around to answer questions and support them throughout the process, colleges and universities. So my advice is just to ask for help. Don't feel like you have to do it by yourself. Just because you keep hearing it's easy, it's easy, it's easier, trust me, there are going to be questions.
Everybody's going to be surprised.
And so be patient.
Which means folks like Rich are going to get lots of questions, him and his team at UIC in those offices, and I'm sure you will get plenty as well. Best of luck to you both, Rich Hayes and Namika Bates. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, what research is saying about the impact of restorative practices instead of suspensions in schools, right after this. Black Chicago public school students are benefiting from a shift in discipline practices at area schools, according to new research. A study from the University of Chicago Education Lab shows using restorative practices led to an 18% reduction in suspensions, along with 35% fewer arrests at school and a 15% decrease in out-of-school arrests. Here to discuss those impacts are Fatima Momeni, a research director at the University of Chicago Education Lab, and Sharon Ponder, a performing arts and social and emotional learning teacher at Carter School of Excellence. Thanks to you both for joining us. Fatima, let's start with you, please. For folks who don't know, what are restorative practices?
Absolutely. So these are a set of practices based on a very simple idea that when incidents happen, when conflicts arise, the most useful response is try to repair the harm that was caused and restore the relationships rather than retaliate against the perpetrator, the person who caused the harm. And what it will look like in schools is there's accountability. There's a lot of emphasis on building relationships, positive relationships, and in general, a culture that reduces the likelihood of conflicts happening in the first place.
Give us a sense of how you conducted the study with CPS, please.
Absolutely. So we partnered with the Chicago Public Schools to understand the impact of restorative practices as they were rolled out in Chicago Public Schools on student outcomes, student behavior, and students' experience in everyday experiences in their school. And so we were able to use data from when the CPS started rolling out these practices in 2014 up to 2019. And we see reductions, as you mentioned, in suspension, in arrests. We see improvement in school culture as reported by students themselves, with students reporting that they have an increased sense of belonging, that they feel the school is a safer place, and also that their classmates are behaving better as they report it.
Giving them more room to learn and to grow and have that community. Sharon, what does that look like in a classroom like yours?
Oh, it looks fabulous. and I say that because restorative practices and social emotional learning, they're aligned. They go hand in hand. And we're looking at ways to build trusting environments. And we're doing that in our schools. And just kind of piggybacking off of some of the data that you've come up with, we're noticing that restorative conversations are really helping, having peace circles, logs, even giving students an opportunity to create their own agency and really talk about issues that are impacting them really helps them feel better and self-aware.
Is there an example that springs to mind of an instance when it was used and how it worked?
Oh, absolutely. So we have unfortunately had a great deal of reporting of bullying and students bullying in different settings, different forms. And so when students come to your classroom, you know, some of that is still in the air and some of the harm is still there. So we're having a peace circle, a talking circle, where we're giving students an opportunity, voice, so that they can kind of share what's going on, but then also the one who inflicted the harm can also hear what this did to the person. And a lot of times we get, I'm sorry, or both students standing up and giving each other a hug and saying, you know, I didn't mean it. So it's really important for us to be able to provide the space in the classroom so that we can have these restorative conversations.
Fatima, as we mentioned, your research found that students who were exposed to the use of these practices, those schools experienced a reduction in both in and out of school arrests. How does this illustrate the broader effect? How does one impact the other or cause the other?
Absolutely. So I think these are two separate things, and I'm glad you mentioned the out of school arrest, because that shows us that it's not what we see in the data is not just school administrators and teachers are responding and learning new techniques. It's actually showing that students' behavior is changing. It's showing us that students are learning some conflict resolution skills that they can now apply not just in schools but outside schools when teachers are not there. So this is, I find it one of the most important findings from our research.
Sharon, you work with mostly Black students, and obviously your research has shown a particular impact on Black students more significantly. What has been the response that you have gotten from the students who are receiving this kind of treatment versus punitive discipline? Yes,
excellent question. So for me, in my career working with Chicago Public Schools, working in Cabrini Green, Inglewood, Henry Horner, and now at Carter School in the Washington Park area, I have noticed a decrease in lashing out, a decrease in students pretty much not feeling as if they're being identified or targeted, and that they have a space where they can share what is actually happening. And some of the key components of social emotional learning is trying to get students to reflect on and manage their emotions, getting them to be able to make better choices and be better decision makers. So we're seeing the conversations are going both ways, with teachers and students to students.
Fatima, what are the impacts of punitive practices, like suspensions, for example, particularly when it comes to Black students?
Absolutely. So over the past 5 decades or so, we have seen a dramatic increase in the use of punitive practices such as suspension and expulsion. And we know quite a bit about how harmful these practices can be. We know students who are exposed to these practices are more likely to drop out, less likely to graduate, less likely to go to college. And when they enter society as adults, they earn less, they're more likely to be arrested and incarcerated. So, and we know that like students of color, Black and Hispanic students are more likely to be exposed to these practices. So they're disproportionately affected by these punitive practices that have been in place. And so the important thing about restorative practices is that it provides an alternative to educators and teachers that they can now use, because you can't just tell teachers, don't use punitive practices, don't suspend them. You have to give them another tool that they can apply when they face sometimes very serious instances of misconduct in their buildings. They have to have a tool set that they can apply to address those issues.
Go ahead. Did you want to add something?
I was just going to add, and I want to just shout out our Office of Social Emotional Learning, Dr. Cynthia Treadwell, because they're doing exactly that, giving us, not just teachers, but our SICAs, our support staff, giving them tools and resources, and we're feeling more empowered with the resources and the training that we're getting from places like the Office of Social Emotional Learning, and it really does help.
Sounds like positive impact, and you mentioned sort of like that school to prison pipeline that we hear so much about.
Yes.
We are out of time. I was going to ask about the impact on Latino boys, but it sounds like there's some more research that is warranted there, and of course there's more information for viewers on our website, but we'll have to leave it there. My thanks to Fatima Momini and Sharon Ponder for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Up next, how a 3-time MLB All-Star is aiming to make baseball training accessible and affordable. But first, a look at the weather. Curtis Granderson spent 16 seasons playing Major League Baseball. Now he's passing down those years of experience to the next generation of players and inspiring them to pursue college. Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez tells us about the Grandy Man's Baseball Academy.
I was in their shoes, and I was also in your shoes. I started playing when I was 6 years old.
Curtis Granderson is retired from Major League Baseball, but he's still making moves on the field.
These are the highest level of baseball players that you can become without going to a professional level, and all of them are striving to become pros.
Granderson is the founder of Chicago Baseball and Educational Academy. He runs it at his alma mater, the University of Illinois at Chicago.
We built the stadium where we're sitting right now in 2014, and then 2 years later, like, okay, how do we get the community access to this amazing view? I call it the best view in baseball.
The organization runs a variety of camps, clinics, and tournaments for kids across Chicago all year long.
Everyone talks about how segregated this city is. And baseball and sport, I feel like, is a really good neutralizer of bringing people together.
The 3-time MLB All-Star says the program's mission is to empower youth by playing hard and dreaming big.
And when I was playing Major League Baseball, I was one of a handful of players with a college degree. So I knew the importance of education and also giving back. I didn't know it was called giving back at the time. I would just watch my parents do it.
Look up. 8-year-old Cameron Vasquez is already thinking big.
Do you want to play professionally?
Yes.
Yes?
How come?
So I could be like Babe Ruth.
Oh, you like Babe Ruth?
Yeah. True fact, he was the one who made us put black paint around our faces.
UIC baseball player James Harris is one of the coaches in the organization.
It's really just about giving back for me. It's always fun hanging out with kids like this. They're eager to learn.
The college senior started playing when he was a kid, now working to score a spot in the big leagues.
That's definitely one of the big dreams for me, making it to the league, telling my mom she doesn't have to work anymore.
Curtis Granderson believes one way to get to the big leagues is through education. Currently, less than 7% of players on MLB rosters are black. That's according to Central Florida's Institute for Diversity in Ethics in Sport.
This past year in the Major League Baseball draft, 80% of the players drafted were from college. So if we're gonna draft players from college, we gotta get more players into college. We have to get more players of color into college.
For some kids, this is the first time they've stepped onto a college campus, an experience Granderson says inspires kids to become a student athlete.
Now I'm in a position where I have the ability to help other people fulfill their dreams. And it may not necessarily be at the major league level. It could be becoming a scout, becoming an umpire, being the first to go to college, being the first to graduate college. Anyone want to play for the Cubs? Yeah. Anybody want to play for the White Sox? Yeah.
For Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
They want to play for all the teams. To learn more about the program, you can visit our website. And that's our show for tonight. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and a special time, 10:30, for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to recognize its 20 attorneys who have been named in the 2024 edition of the Best Lawyers in America.